McKee. Okay, gotcha. OLC Live. We are back at it, and I am joined with Kendall St Hillaire.
Very good. Hi.
And I'm so excited to have you here. We were just talking about how you're about to do this session that we're going to kind of preview a bit.
It's practice for the
it's
presentation.
Practice. Yeah, there we go. And it's on learning analytics, if I do recall.
Yes.
And that's a topic that's a big topic.
Yes.
Bigger and bigger, it seems like every day. And so yeah, I wanted to get a sense for who you are, how you got involved in this.
Okay.
And what's happening at 9:45.
A lot of things are happening at 9:45. I hope they're all good. No, a little bit about me. I am the assistant dean of the virtual campus at Indian River State College. Should I be looking both ways?
You can look.
Okay.
You can look there.
Hi, everybody. But I started off actually at Indian River State College as an instructional designer.
Okay.
I have an instructional design background and was hired to help design some of the master courses that the virtual campus was going to begin to offer. So we got the virtual campus, the first 4 degree programs were built in 1 year. There was a team of instructional designers, and 56 courses actually in 1 year.
Wow. Yeah.
So we started to build up the course catalog for the virtual campus. They all follow a master course layout, which was something unique in itself. And then after a little while, I put my hat in the ring for at the time, the administrative director of the virtual campus, stepped into that role. And I'm now the assistant dean of the virtual campus. So what's great about the instructional design background that I'm bringing to the project is that I have some experience as a designer, but also the understanding of the theoretical frameworks and everything that we apply in our master course design, which helps us explain why we're asking the faculty to design the courses in a certain way. So the reason why the master courses have been so helpful in the analytics arena is that we have, for the first time, we're to some degree comparing apples to apples when it comes to the online classes.
Sure.
And our analytics initiative started about 2 years after the virtual campus launched. And so we had quite a catalog of online classes designed in a master course format. We were able to apply analytics to our learning management system, and it has just since grown from there. The analytics that we're looking at track student behaviors in terms of time in the course, the amount of frequency of logins. We're also really looking closely at each course's grade center, because that is where we have a really good idea of how the student is currently doing at any point in the semester. So the master course model has helped that as well, because all of the master courses have the same grade centers set up properly with the team of designers and developers that have helped the faculty do so. So once again, going back to that master course model, that has really allowed us, it's laid the groundwork to allow us to build the analytics initiative at our college.
So when was it that, you said it was 2 years after these 4 programs launched. When was that? So
we started building the courses in 2012. The virtual campus officially launched in 2013.
Okay.
And by 2015, we were full speed ahead with the analytics initiative.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is not only do we have the online courses that have been built and are currently being built at that time frame, we also were working with our faculty to make sure that they understood how to use the grade centers properly. Everyone up to that point had been kind of doing their own thing. Some faculty were keeping scores in Excel and then bringing them into the LMS, but we really had to work on training the faculty up on using the grade center properly, because that's where the analytics was drilling into to grab the scores for each student.
Yeah, okay.
So that was an effort in itself. A lot of PD around just properly using the grade center properly.
And as you were getting ready to implement the analytics aspect of things, could you tell us what that looked like? How did you decide on what things you were going to measure?
Well, looking back, it was, I'm surprised we were able to do it so quickly. We had our instructional vice presidents at the college, along with the CEO, who Virtual Campus falls under, our vice president of institutional technology. The 3 of them worked together to kind of put a loose game plan around what they wanted to fall out at the bottom of the analytics project. so they had the big picture of what they were looking for in terms of data. But I also had to work very closely with the instructional deans, some of the department chairs, even faculty themselves to kind of get a feel for what kind of data they'd like to have at their fingertips in order to do their job more efficiently. And I also had to work with other departments around the college I wasn't really working closely with up to that point, like our reporting department and research. So it was a really interesting effort because we had a lot of people at the table that weren't necessarily communicating with one another previously on a regular basis. And it's kind of spawned some interesting conversations among the different departments, which have continued to this day. In fact, just this past week, we had our Dean of Enterprise Systems, which runs reporting, in a meeting with myself and other instructional deans, just talking about where we're headed next with data. So those conversations, I'm sure, happened before, but just not as frequently as they did when we started the analytics conversation. So we had the big, the end goal for our vice presidents was to have information that would allow deans and other administrators to have a bird's eye view of what was happening in their areas. And but we also wanted to drill down to make sure that our advisors and our faculty had information that could be useful to them as they're working with students. And so that information included obviously how the students were doing in each course grade-wise, but also looking at some behavior data, how frequently the students are logging in, whether or not they've missed deadlines, how they're doing obviously on their assessments, but even time in the course, which I realize is a tricky variable in itself because sometimes people can download the content and use it when they're not in the LMS. So we also had to work on educating our faculty and actually all of our end users on I don't want to say limitations, but things to consider when looking at this data. What didn't tell everything, but it definitely gave a better glimpse at what's happening in the courses.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And so what were some early on? Was there any low-hanging fruit things that emerged from this big set of data that was surprisingly helpful?
Well, yes. I mean, I think one thing that we really had not streamlined up to that point was really, making sure grades were presented, were added into the grade center in a reasonable time frame. And what I mean by that is the college decided, institutionally, we decided that by week 4 of a semester, grades had to be inside the learning management system so that students could see them, so that we could start pulling analytic reports. And then our instructional side of the house decided that they'd start looking at benchmarks throughout the term. So week 4 grades had to be in. By week 8 of the semester, the instructional deans and vice presidents would huddle up and they'd take a look at what was happening in every division. How many students are currently below 70% in their class? How many of them were there? Which faculty members did they belong to? It was, for the first time, they had a better idea of what was happening in all of their courses in their division. They'd never had that information before. And then they'd continue on. So week 10, week 12, week 14, they'd always get together and see if they were closing that gap, so that if they had 500 students that were below 70 at week 8 or 9, did that diminish? Did that number gradually decrease as you got closer to the end of term? And so that was one thing that our deans found helpful. For the first time, they could see their entire division, but then drill down in these reports to see, okay, this department seems to have 500 students below 70. Let me jump into that. Which courses? Where are those students? Which courses are they in? Who are those students? We could get down to the student level information. So that was helpful. One of the requests that came out of that work was, well, the faculty have this, the deans have this information. How do we get that information to the advisors, who are also one part of another part of this entire initiative, trying to improve student success.
Absolutely.
So we created some reports that had similar information for the advising side of that. Okay. So that was something that came out of that first attempt.
Yeah, and have there been things that you've started to measure that you wish you had started measuring early on?
That's a good question. I think we're working through this as it kind of unfolds in front of us. So I would say that I think first time out of the chute, we had a pretty good idea of we were able to get to the data that we thought we needed. And really at first, Florida is a performance-based funding state. So we have additional pressure now to get students to completion. It's not just about coming in and filling the seats. That's always been the goal of higher ed, right? Getting students to earn those credentials, those degrees. But now it's just the lens is a lot more focused on completion and retention. So we started tracking our students who were potential graduates, which meant they were set to graduate in that current term. So they have a designator on their, in their information, their student report, student ID, that indicates they are a potential graduate. So we added that fairly early on. It wasn't in the initial reports, but that was something that we found to be really helpful, so that a dean or even a faculty member could go into their courses at the beginning of the term and say, okay, I have 5 students in this class that are expected to graduate this term. Let me make sure I put that little nudge out there to them. Hey, this is your last term. We're all behind you. We know. Trying to rally some momentum and enthusiasm for those students, so that they know they've got resources and support at the college, so that we want to see them graduate. So that was something that just give a little bit more insight to our faculty and instructional deans about who in their division and their departments and their courses were expected to graduate that term, and just try to put that little additional kind of attaboy message, send that message to them. And yeah, it's been, I would say, as we roll new initiatives out around analytics, we're also kind of dabbling in predictive analytics now. As we get more stakeholders involved, I'm hearing, I'd like to see this, or it'd be really helpful if I knew how many students in my, in my division, if you're an instructional dean, how many students in my division are coming in to this term predicted to fail. I mean, as we start showing these reports and the data that's possible, I'm getting a lot of, this is great, but, or I'd like to see this kind of information, which I'm very happy to hear. And we're doing everything we can to get that information to the right stakeholders. But one thing that I personally believe needs to happen next is, we have the data. What's the action plan? And as different groups around the campus start accessing these reports, I think it's very important that we as an institution put together, put together a plan about who's doing what when it comes to reaching out to the students or trying to provide interventions. Because if we have too many departments accessing this information and then trying to be helpful, reaching out to students, trying to get them, to the finish line, we could end up, contacting the student too often, or we could end up, kind of, I don't want to say shooting ourselves in the foot, basically, but essentially we need to make sure that we've got a clear understanding of who's kind of delineating those responsibilities when it comes to using the data and trying to drive student success, because otherwise it's going to be, it could be a little bit of a mess. I don't want 6 people reaching out to one student saying.
Right, totally. There's a similar thing that we've been experiencing at Michigan State University. We've been doing a lot of work around cross-departmental collaboration around learning analytics. And one of the things that emerged early on is realizing, and I think it was a shock to many of us, how many emails students were receiving from so many different departments, that it was, I don't remember what the number was per semester, but it was astronomical to the point where oh, that's, I wouldn't respond to that many emails either, so. Yeah, fascinating. And
it's excuse me. We have our advisors have texting capabilities too, because we found that sometimes was a little bit easier in terms of communicating with students if they're working, or they can't necessarily sit down and have a conversation with the advisor, but they can text back and forth. That was something that our advisors found to be very helpful and allowed them to reach out to students and communicate with students a lot faster than trying to have these call projects. But even something like that, we've got now more people asking, well, can I have the capability, the texting capabilities to reach out to students? And it's great. Yes, but we don't want to exhaust that that avenue either, and have too many texts coming from the college.
And that's a tricky, careful coordination.
It is. But that's where we're headed next, I think, in terms of at the institution level. I think that's what we need to really, I love the fact that we've had a lot of interest. I mean, even our athletic coaches, some of them who are tasked with kind of monitoring the academic and retention side of their own, their athletes, they have access to some of these reports. We have provosts, instructional deans. The number of users on the analytics reports users has grown significantly, I'd say, in the last year, which I think is great. But I think now that we've got people interested in accessing them, learning how to use the reports, now our next phase for this
upcoming
year will be, okay, who's doing what, and making sure that is communicated very clearly.
So, oh, great. So, and I know that you've got this session. It's coming up.
Yes.
And knowing this place, it's pretty spread out around here. I don't remember how many acres this place is, so I want to make sure anyway that I'm sensitive to, your time.
Yep.
But as you are heading there, you're going to be doing this session, sharing some of these things, and I believe, if I remember right, it looked like it was going to be streamed for our virtual attendees.
I didn't know that. Great.
I could be wrong.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, someone going to the session, what are you hoping that people take away from the session?
Well, I hope that if their institutions are not currently using analytics, this might give them some, but maybe considering it, this might give them some insight into how our institution has been able to make this initiative a reality. The lessons learned, we have some we talk about some of the things that we've learned along the way, what we do differently. And I hope that perhaps given some of the examples that we'll show, we have some of the reports that we'll pull up and display, that might give them some idea about what data we are looking at and whether or not that would be useful to their institution.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that will be of benefit to our attendees. So.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah,
so thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's good to meet you, and hopefully maybe next year, maybe you'll be back and sharing some of the things that you've learned in this next transition too, as you're working cross-departmentally around coordinating a strategic plan for communication and those kind of things. I know that that's something, it's a big challenge that many institutions are working on and trying to figure out. So it's I appreciate you coming and sharing the things that you're learning. And
sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
So, absolutely.
All right. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And we will be moving to another interview coming up here at 9:30. So what time is it? 9:20. So we're going to take a pause. We're going to take a 10-minute pause or so, and then we'll be back online then.